In the spring of 2024, archaeologists drilled beneath the most famous facade on Earth. They expected to find one tomb. Instead, they found 12 bodies, a broken jug that looked impossibly like a movie prop, and a question no one had thought to ask. The city of Petra was carved by hand into rose-red sandstone 2,000 years ago. It housed 30,000 people in the middle of a desert where almost nothing grows. And then, one by one, they left. Not because of war, not because of plague. They simply walked away from paradise. The strangest part of Petra isn't how the Nabataeans built it. It's why 30,000 people abandoned a city with running water, gardens, theaters, and wealth beyond measure, when the buildings were still standing. 85% of Petra remains unexcavated. The Treasury still keeps its secrets. And somewhere in the Jordanian desert, the answer is still waiting. This is the story of a civilization that engineered its own impossible existence. And when the systems that sustained it began to fail, the people vanished within generations. The question is not what destroyed Petra. The question is, why didn't anyone stay to rebuild it? Petra sits in southern Jordan, 160 miles south of Amman, hidden in a valley of rose-red stone. The Nabataeans, nomadic Arab traders, arrived in the 4th century BCE and transformed a desert canyon into the capital of a kingdom. By the 1st century CE, Petra controlled the incense and spice trade linking Arabia, Egypt, and the Mediterranean. Strabo wrote that the Nabataeans levied a 25% tax on all imports. The wealth was staggering. The city peaked at 30,000 inhabitants. Then, in 106 CE, the Roman Empire annexed the kingdom. Petra became Arabia, Petrea, but the city did not collapse. It adapted. Roman engineering merged with Nabataean ingenuity. The theater was carved from bedrock. A colonnaded street ran through the city's heart. Life continued. The decline began not with invasion, but with geography. Sea routes opened. Overland caravans became obsolete. And on May 19, 363 CE, an earthquake destroyed a third of the city in a single night. By the 7th century, Petra was largely abandoned. It remained unknown to the Western world until 1812. And in 2024, a discovery beneath the Treasury proved we had been wrong about almost everything. The Nabataeans called their city Rakhmu. They were traders, engineers, and diplomats who moved between empires. They spoke Nabataean Aramaic, worshipped Dushara and Alat, and understood something that still baffles archaeologists: how to make a desert bloom. Their water system was extraordinary. In a region with 6 inches of annual rainfall, they built diversion dams, carved tunnels through solid rock, and constructed particle-settling basins that purified every drop. The American Society of Civil Engineers recognizes it as a masterwork of hydraulic engineering. They ate fish imported from the Dead Sea. They cultivated grains and fruits at Baida, north of the city. They held funerary feasts in banquet halls beside their tombs. Archaeologist Megan Perry notes, "We have lots of evidence of Nabataeans feasting." They were not a city of the dead. Petra housed living families, merchants, priests, and children. Before the earthquake, wealthy citizens lived in villas adorned with colorful frescoes. The population was cosmopolitan: Arabian, Greek, Roman, Egyptian influences, all merging in one canyon. Their religion was complex. Dushara, the supreme god, began as a simple stone block, a Bethel, and slowly took on human form, influenced by Greek Zeus. Alat, the goddess, became Aphrodite. They absorbed the world without losing themselves. And they built the Treasury, Al-Khazneh, 40 meters of rose-red sandstone carved by hand. For 2,000 years, it was assumed to be the royal tomb of King Aretas IV. The truth, it turns out, was buried beneath it. But our emotional anchor is not a king. It is a Swiss explorer named Johann Ludwig Burckhardt, who spoke Arabic fluently, recited verses of the Quran by heart, and disguised himself as a Muslim merchant named Sheikh Ibrahim ibn Abdullah. He had trained for years in Aleppo, learning to pass as a local. He wrote to his parents that they would not recognize him in Turkish robes with a respectable beard. In August 1812, traveling toward Cairo, he heard whispers of ruins in a narrow mountain valley. He told a guide he wished to sacrifice a goat at the tomb of the prophet Aaron. The guide led him through a gorge. 30 minutes later, Burckhardt saw something that stopped his breath. He described it in sober, careful terms. He could not linger. If his guide suspected he was a European searching for treasure, he would be killed. He sacrificed the goat, returned to his caravan, and wrote in his journal words that would change history. Burckhardt died 5 years later. Dysentery in Cairo. He was 32 years old. He never found the source of the Niger, his life's ambition. He never saw Petra become a symbol of Jordan, a UNESCO site, a film set. He never knew that his discovery would outlive every empire he feared. But the Nabataeans, the people who built the city he found, left almost no records of their own, no histories, no royal chronicles. We know them through Greek writers, Roman coins, and the bones they buried beneath their greatest monument. On May 19, 363 CE, at the third hour of the night, the ground opened. 120 miles north, in Jerusalem, 200 years of hope collapsed into dust. In Petra, the magnificent facade of the theatre fell inward. The colonnaded street buckled, and the water system, the engineering miracle that made the desert habitable, cracked. Archaeologist Philip Hammond found the evidence in the 1960s. While excavating the main theatre, he recovered coins of Constantine and Constantius II. The destruction layer was unmistakable. But here is the first contradiction. The city did not die that night. Today, many historians believe the 363 earthquake destroyed Petra. But when archaeologists dug deeper, they found evidence that seemed to make that theory impossible. The city was rebuilt. Churches were constructed. The Petra papyri show land transactions and taxes continuing into the 6th century. And whatever happened sent 30,000 people walking away from a city that was still standing. The earthquake destroyed a third of the city. The Temple of the Winged Lions was never restored. The pool complex collapsed into rubble. But in the residential districts, people stayed. They rebuilt with reused stone. They adapted. The end was not sudden. It was a slow unraveling. Here is the second contradiction: the water system. The Nabataeans had built diversion dams, retention reservoirs, and particle-settling basins that purified water in a desert with 6 inches of annual rain. After 363, the flood control was never fully restored. Alluvial sediment buried parts of the colonnaded street. But the springs still flowed. Why didn't they rebuild? The trade routes had shifted. Maritime commerce via the Red Sea and Aqaba made overland caravans obsolete. Petra's purpose, to be the middleman between Arabia and the Mediterranean, evaporated. But people don't abandon their homes just because business slows. Something else was missing. The third contradiction: the population did not die. There are no mass graves, no evidence of plague, no battle scars on the walls. 30,000 people simply left. They relocated to settlements near natural springs. But archaeologists have found no corresponding population spike in neighboring cities. An entire civilization dissolved into the landscape. And then silence. For 1,000 years, Petra existed only in local Bedouin memory. The Western world forgot it entirely. When Burckhardt arrived in 1812, he wrote that future travelers would need armed protection. He could not have imagined that his discovery would attract 1 million visitors a year, and that 2 centuries later, we would still be asking where everyone went. And in 2024, beneath the Treasury itself, ground-penetrating radar found a chamber. When archaeologists from the American Center of Research and the University of St. Andrews opened it, they found 12 complete skeletons. One was clutching a ceramic vessel. The vessel looked nearly identical to the Holy Grail from Indiana Jones. But this was not fiction. This was a tomb that had been sealed for 2,000 years. The 2024 tomb chamber measures 18 feet by 18 feet, 9 feet tall, 12 skeletons, complete. In a city where almost every tomb was robbed centuries ago, this chamber had remained untouched. The significance, according to Professor Richard Bates of St. Andrews, is that very few complete Nabataean burials have ever been recovered from Petra. The skeletons were interred in separate sarcophagi. Their placement beneath the Treasury suggests high status. But here is the anomaly. If the Treasury was the royal tomb of Aratus IV, why are there 12 bodies? And why does the sediment dating place the tomb's construction from the mid-1st century BCE to the early 2nd century CE, spanning before and after Aratus's reign? Center. Large text, Why was Petra abandoned? In gold, 72 points bold sans serif. Left side, 363 earthquake, trade route shift, water system damage, Byzantine decline. Right side, continuous habitation, missing population, springs still flowed, churches rebuilt. Bottom, credibility percentages, cascade failure, 78%, economic obsolescence, 62%, engineering catastrophe, 55%, cultural dissolution, 31%. One skeleton in the chamber was found clutching a ceramic vessel. Josh Gates, who documented the discovery for the Discovery Channel, noted that when the team spotted what looked like a chalice, everyone froze. The object looked nearly identical to the Holy Grail, featured in Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, set in the ancient building directly above the tomb. Detailed examination revealed the truth. It was not a chalice. It was the top part of a broken jug, likely dating to the 1st century BCE. Nabataean pottery is extraordinarily fine, often only 1.5 millimeters thick, painted with flowers, figures, and geometric motifs. The vessel was ceremonial, not magical, but the image is unforgettable. Dr. Tim Kinnead, who sampled the sediment surrounding the burials, provided crucial dates. The tomb walls were constructed between the mid-1st century BCE and the early 2nd century CE. That means the treasury, or whatever structure stood above this chamber, was built over a period spanning the rise and peak of the Nabataean kingdom. The dating is revolutionary. Previously, archaeologists worked on assumptions and conjectures. Kinnaird emphasized that having pottery, ecofacts, and sediments to date, the treasury's construction moves the field from guesswork towards certainty, a monumental achievement for everyone involved. But the most important finding may be what the geophysics suggests is still buried. Professor Bates and his team indicated that the survey data points to additional tombs hidden beneath the treasury, a necropolis no one knew existed. And the next step, exhuming and studying the bodies, depends on funding that may not come for years. The 12 skeletons can tell us about diet, disease, migration, and family relationships. They can unlock a view of Nabataean life that has never been accessible. But for now, they rest where they were buried, beneath a monument that millions of tourists photograph every year, unaware that the city's greatest secret lies directly beneath their feet. 85% of Petra remains unexcavated. The 2016 satellite discovery proved that monuments the size of swimming pools can hide in plain sight. The 2024 tomb proved that our assumptions about even the most famous structure were wrong. If the treasury is not what we thought, what else have we misunderstood? The evidence is clear on what happened: earthquake, trade collapse, water degradation, gradual departure. But the evidence contradicts the simple story. The city survived the earthquake. The trade shifted slowly. The water still flowed. And 30,000 people, an entire civilization, chose to leave paradise rather than repair it. We have 3 case files. Each points to a different culprit. Case file 1, the cascade failure. The 363 earthquake did not destroy Petra. It initiated a cascade. The water infrastructure was damaged. Flood control failed. Alluvial sediment buried trade spaces. Rebuilding was inadequate. Meanwhile, maritime trade diverted commerce to Aqaba. The Roman economy contracted. Each factor alone was survivable. Together, they made staying irrational. This theory is supported by the Petra papyri, which show declining economic activity into the 6th century. It is supported by archaeological evidence of partial rebuilding with inferior materials. And it is supported by the relocation pattern. Residents moved to spring-fed settlements rather than dying in place. The weakness. Cascade failures usually leave evidence of struggle. Petra shows adaptation, not desperation. The Byzantines built churches. The population mixed rather than fled. If the cascade was fatal, why did it take 300 years? Case File 2. Economic obsolescence. Petra's entire existence depended on being the middleman. When Rome annexed Nabataea in 106 CE, the kingdom became a province. When sea routes opened via the Red Sea, overland caravans became luxury nostalgia. Petra had no purpose. The earthquake simply accelerated the inevitable. But here is what this theory struggles to explain. Petra's inhabitants were not passive victims of economics. They were adaptive engineers who had already survived Roman annexation, religious conversion, and at least one previous earthquake. Why would trade alone finish what those forces could not? Case File 3. The engineering catastrophe. The Nabataean water system was existential. In a desert with 6 inches of annual rainfall, 30,000 people required every drop to be captured, purified, and stored. When the 363 earthquake damaged the diversion dams and flood tunnels, the system was never fully restored. The ASCE notes that post-earthquake alluvial deposition suggests flood control was abandoned. Without water management, Petra was uninhabitable. Yet this theory faces its own contradiction. The Byzantines who lived in Petra after the Nabataeans were not master hydraulic engineers, yet they survived for centuries using the same springs and channels. If water alone dictated survival, the city should have emptied immediately after 363 CE. It did not. Recent studies by the Northeastern Petra Project confirm that the 363 earthquake destroyed key public buildings and altered urban trade spaces through sediment encroachment. Surface finds indicate continuous habitation until the early 5th century, but with significantly reduced political significance. The city did not die, it faded. Here is what makes Petra different from other lost cities. Pompeii was buried in a day. Angkor was reclaimed by jungle. But Petra was neither destroyed nor conquered. Its people made a choice, generation after generation, to invest less, repair less, care less, until one day the last family locked their door and walked into the desert. That is not a catastrophe. That is a civilization deciding its own end. The truth likely contains all 3 case files. The earthquake damaged infrastructure that was already strained by economic decline. The trade shift reduced the city's wealth just when it needed resources most. And the Nabataean identity, the cultural will to maintain the impossible, had already dissolved under Roman and Byzantine rule. No single cause destroyed Petra. A civilization that had survived conquest, conversion, and catastrophe finally reached a point where staying cost more than leaving. Petra was not killed. It was simply no longer worth saving. Behind every lost city are people who never knew they were building a mystery. The Nabataeans buried their dead beneath their greatest monument, feasted beside their tombs, and engineered water in a desert where water should not exist. Those 12 people beneath the Treasury may never tell us who they were, but they remind us that Petra was not just monuments, it was families, traders, and lives that quietly disappeared. They did not know that within a few generations, their name would be forgotten, their city would be empty, and a Swiss explorer disguised as a dead man would be the only one to remember them. Perhaps the most unsettling fact isn't that 30,000 people abandoned Petra. It's that after 2,000 years of investigation, including ground-penetrating radar, satellite imagery, and a tomb no one knew existed, we still cannot say with certainty why they left. 85% of the city remains underground. The Treasury still keeps its secrets. And somewhere in the Jordanian desert, the answer is still waiting. Why didn't anyone stay to rebuild it? Some stories stay buried. We dig anyway. If you were a Nabataean in 363 CE, would you have stayed to rebuild? Or would you have walked away? Drop your answer below. I read every single one. And if you think Petra is the strangest lost settlement ever discovered, wait until you see what we found at the Library of Alexandria. Subscribe not because you have to, because some doors only open from the inside.